Part 28. Global Copy, My Talent is Called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 271. When Luzaoki returned home, her sister finally finished washing. Looking at Lu Wanyi, who looked like a hibiscus out of water, Luzaoki's eyes couldn't help but light up. My sister was wearing a white dress today, as if she was afraid of the cold, with a layer of light green gauze on the outside. She looked like a fairy who had been banished from the mortal world. After the transformation of Golden Apple, my sister's skin and mental state have been improved, which has also improved her appearance. If the older sister was Xiajiabiu, as gentle and beautiful as a lady, now she can be said to be a serious woman with ice-cold muscles and jade bones, a moonshine flower, and the face of a fairy. If you were walking on the street, wouldn't it be the kind that attracts everyone's attention and has a 1000% chance of turning heads? Thinking of this, Luzaoki suddenly realized something was wrong. He quickly found a light green hat in the cloakroom and put it on her sister's head. This hat matches my sister's clothes very well, it doesn't look out of place, and it can cover up my sister's appearance, finally suppressing her charming light a little. But Luzaoki felt that it was still not enough, so she took out a two-piece set of white cloth masks and dark green glasses and handed them to her sister. These glasses have dark green lenses and large black frames. They look very high-end and elegant. The only bad thing is that after wearing them, everything you look at looks green. Oh, why are you covering it up so tightly? You're here, aren't you? Lu Wanyi pouted and reluctantly put on the mask. I don't want to take the remaining sunglasses with me. Luzaoki said, Humph, my Wanyi is so beautiful, how can I let others see her? He insisted on putting on sunglasses for his sister. The elder sister looked at Luzaoki with a funny face and did not object to her younger brother's petty behavior. After tumbling, Luzaoki looked at the tightly covered Lu Wanyi and nodded with satisfaction. Let's go. Sister said and naturally came over to hold Luzaoki's hand, and the two walked out of the door affectionately. The two of them stood on the street waiting for the bus. Luzaoki looked helpless. He was on every possible precaution, but he still didn't expect that even if his sister didn't reveal her face at all, she would still be eye-catching with her graceful figure, gentle temperament, and fashionable outfit. Luzaoki also has top-notch looks and figure. Standing on the street, this pair of handsome men and beautiful women naturally attracted the attention of countless people. In the past, Luzaoki didn't care about this kind of gaze, but when her sister was with him, Luzaoki felt that this kind of gaze was quite dazzling. He always felt that they must be playing tricks on his Wanyi. There are always unscrupulous people who want to harm me. This is his mentality now. In particular, there was a tall, thin young man who wandered back and forth in front of him several times, staring intently at Lu Wanyi, as if he intended to use his highly myopic eyes to penetrate Lu Wanyi's strict dress and see her clearly. Average appearance. Not only Luzaoki couldn't stand it any longer, but Lu Wanyi couldn't bear it either. She couldn't help but shouted to this person, "Be careful with the pole." The man was stunned for a moment, and he didn't know what he was thinking. He actually said hey. Then he hit the telephone pole with a dooin sound and fell to the ground. Lu Wanyi burst out laughing with a puff. Her voice was as crisp and sweet as a wind chime. Just because of this, the boy was too embarrassed to hang around anymore and left here in despair. Luzaoki's fists were already hardened. If he didn't leave, Luzaoki would go up and beat him up. Being treated like this made it hard for him to go up and teach others a lesson. But his face was still ugly, and he angrily said to Lu Wanyi, "Did you do it on purpose or accidentally?" He was referring to the fact that his sister told people to be careful with the pole. This homophonic sound is no different from "be careful with the liver." Lu Wanyi blinked. "I was careless on purpose." As she said this, the corners of Lu Wanyi's mouth under the mask involuntarily curved up. She didn't know why, but she really liked seeing Lu Xiaoqi nervous about herself and jealous of herself. So interesting. Okay, okay, this is how you play, right? Lu Xiaoqi was so angry that the two of them got along day and night. How could he not know what the stinky sister was planning? I began to whisper in my heart how to retaliate against my sister. When the word girlfriend was mentioned, Lu Wanyi's face turned slightly red, but she did not object. Is it so exciting? We were still holding hands when we got in the car. You told me we were siblings. All he could do was glare at Lu Xiaoqi hatefully and reach out to grab his soft flesh. You used to call me Wanyi when you were looking at the stars and the moon, but now you become sister when you get in the car? Given Wang Yanran's status, is it reasonable to live in a villa? Uncle driver? He wanted to complain about Wang's mental state in naming his villa area. But Lu Xiaoqi was the first to speak. Don't get me wrong, uncle, she is my sister. My sister is becoming more and more rebellious now. I must treat her well today. She rarely did such behavior, but today she was really stimulated by Lu Xiaoqi's nonsense. The window slowly rolled down, and the driver was a middle-aged uncle. Just in time, the car is here. The uncle didn't expect this answer. He was stunned for a moment and said awkwardly, "Oh, then your brother and sister have a really good relationship." With that said, he reported the address of the villa. Lu Wanyi. The uncle driving the car seemed to be extremely smart and had a very good emotional intelligence. Seeing that the atmosphere was slightly quiet, he said, "Is the young man taking his girlfriend out to play?" "Uncle. The city knows how to play. But I have something to ask for, and I can't speak freely, which makes me feel very depressed." Lu Xiaoqi waved, and the online car-hailing car slowly stopped in front of him. So exciting? The car started slowly. So he deliberately sighed and said with a sad face, "Sister, if my brother-in-law knows what we are like, won't he be angry?" Lu Xiaoqi nodded and pulled her sister into the car. Lu Xiaoqi thought so too, but when he found out that the entire villa area was under Wang Yanran's name, and even named it after such a shameless thing as Yanran Yuxiao, he felt bad all over. While feeling ashamed and annoyed, I don't know why I still feel such a bit of taboo pleasure. Lu Xiaoqi originally wanted to take her sister directly to the college to find Wang Yanran, but she was told that he was not at the college, but was doing a research, and asked Lu Xiaoqi to wait for her at the designated place. Lu Xiaoqi raised his eyebrows. If you are unkind, don't blame me, Lu Wanyi, for being unjust. I will expel you from the Lu family directly. Let me knock, I love hearing this. Hurry Hisoka. Lu Wanyi said quietly, he is my god brother, not related by blood. Lu Wanyi. Lu Wanyi was angry and ashamed. She opened her mouth to talk back but didn't know where to start. Is this the passenger with the last number 20XX? Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 272. Lu Xiaoqi remained unmoved. Just kidding, how can my defense power of 9999 plus be defeated by a little girl like you? Seeing that she still dared to take action, Lu Xiaoqi immediately returned the favor and said sadly, "Sister, tell me, if my brother-in-law knows that the child in your belly is mine, will he be furious?" Lu Wanyi. Uncle driver. As an enthusiastic citizen, shouldn't the Zhejiang masses kick the accelerator and send these two sword men and silver women directly to the police station? But the uncle thought about it, gritted his teeth for the sake of his 5-star praise, and chose to endure the humiliation and swallow his anger. Lu Wanyi suddenly became popular. She never expected that Lu Xiaoqi would be so bold and talk nonsense in front of strangers. And he said it so, unsightlily. She sharpened her teeth, opened her mouth, and bit Lu Xiaoqi's arm directly. After biting twice, Lu Xiaoqi still didn't move at all. Lu Wanyi didn't dare to bite hard. She found that after eating that weird-looking apple, she not only gained weight, but also gained strength and other things. It's hard to explain these things, but it's just that the body has undergone great changes. This has also caused her ability to control herself to weaken. If she really bites her hard. After all, he was his younger brother, and if he was really bitten, he would be the one who felt bad. He had no choice but to let go and turned his head to the side angrily to show that he was angry. Ah, I have to die, I have to die, I have to die. Luzaoki couldn't help but love her sister when she saw her mixed expression of shame and anger. He almost retaliated in front of the driver, tit for tat. But he was just teasing his sister, but he didn't really want to make her angry. Otherwise, why don't you do it yourself? So he said again, Uncle, don't mind, we are joking with you. She's actually my girlfriend. As he spoke, he put his arm around Lu Wanyi's waist, but was slapped away by his sister. Uncle. Yes, yes, everything you said is right. You see, if I believe it or not, it's all over. The uncle didn't look sideways and concentrated on driving, as if nothing happened in the car. Soon, the two came to Wang Yanran's villa area. The car stopped at the gate. As soon as Lu Zioqi and her sister got out of the car, the guards from the security booth opposite came over. This is a middle-aged man about 30 years old. Looking at his strong physique, you can tell that he is no ordinary man. He politely asked Lu Zioqi, "Are they Mr. Lu and Ms. Lu?" Lu Zioqi nodded, and the man continued, "Hello, Ms. Wang has already told us, please come with me." As expected of a villa area, the service is great. The two people passed the gate smoothly under his leadership. There was an SUV parked at the door. When they saw three people coming, the electric door opened directly. "Get in the car." Lu Zioqi took her sister into the car, started the SUV slowly, and drove smoothly in the villa area. Along the way, Lu Zioqi saw many beautiful scenes. Mr. Wang actually built this villa area like a garden. There are not only small bridges and flowing water, but also mountains, rivers, and lakes. The surrounding gardens have been carefully built into various shapes, and there are antique pavilions standing on the huge rockery. Lu Zioqi was dazzled and shocked. Sure enough, you really can't imagine the life of a rich person. Although he is considered to have a small amount of assets, he can still only play the role of an upstart in front of these big guys. Many foundations require a long period of accumulation to form. You can never imagine how much fun a truly rich man can have. There was silence all the way. Lu Zioqi and her sister were both shocked by the scenery inside, as if Grandma Lu had entered the Grand View Garden. When the SUV stopped steadily in front of a Chinese-style loft, Lu Zioqi came back to her senses. He was really bored and couldn't help coughing, intending to mention something more serious, that there is actually a simple wooden house in the middle of the forest. There are towering piles of firewood next to it, which seems to be a firewood shed. Lu Zioqi walked around, wandering wherever he pleased and not knowing where he ended up. Then she changed the angle and continued to raise the knife and slash. "Hello, Mr. Lu. The destination of this trip has been reached. Please get off the bus on the right side. It seems the end has been reached." Just when the blade of the knife was about to touch the wooden stake, it was held back steadily. "That's right, why does it sound like a bus?" Lu Zioqi just felt strange. They were exhausted these days, so who would still use firewood to light a fire in this villa? Is there anyone in the woods? Looking up, I saw only a dense forest. As soon as the two got out of the car, the attic door opened automatically on both sides, and Wang Yanran's cold voice came out from inside. Lu Zioqi listened patiently for a while, talking about how good the online drama was, how to match the clothes, and so on. "Do you have a role to speak here?" "Shut up." Seeing Lu Zioqi looking at him with dissatisfaction, her sister even made a face at him while she was talking. Luzioki knew that she was bullying her in the car before taking revenge, but you have to figure out who the outsider is. Come in. Luzioki just complained in her heart and said nothing. She nodded slightly and pulled her sister out of the car door that opened automatically. Okay, okay, do this to me, right? Luzioki simply ignored the two women, turned around and walked out of the attic, preparing to visit Wang Yanran's territory alone. Only then did Lu Wanyi realize that Luzioki had brought her to find Wang Yanran. Luzioki, who was quarreling with Wang Yanran without raising her head, just rolled her eyes. Then he rushed into the attic first. Repeating this process several times, the wooden stake that had not been touched by her evenly shattered into a dozen even pieces with a click sound. The most important thing is that my sister is still there to help the villain, nodding her head and saying, "That's right. Not on the same channel as him at all." After walking dozens of steps, I suddenly became enlightened. Completely different from Luzioki, she has a very good relationship with Wang Yanran, and they usually communicate through phone calls, so naturally there is no sense of strangeness. Her eyes lit up and she exclaimed happily, "Yanran." The next moment, she swung the knife. Luzioki raised her eyebrows slightly and walked slowly into the forest. He planned to go back the same way, but his ears moved slightly and he heard a noise from the other side of the woods. When Luzioki entered the attic, he found that the two women were already holding hands and chatting about topics that he didn't understand at all. In a flat yard, a girl of 15 or 16 years old was holding a long knife and her eyes were fixed on the wooden pile. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 273. Interesting. You can still play like this. Luzioki's eyes were bright and thoughtful. He finally knew where the pile of firewood came from. After chopping a tree stump, the little girl did not stop her movements, gathering up the scattered wooden blocks on the ground and stacking them aside, and then took out new wooden stumps from behind. After repeating it several times, her breathing gradually became heavier and sweat stains appeared on her forehead. Luzioki crossed her arms and leaned against the side of the wooden house, watching with gusto. Don't get me wrong, it's not that he stared at the little girl because he looked pretty and cute. It's purely because her movements are clean and neat, and full of a wonderful charm. She cuts out the knife, closes it and releases it smoothly, which is pleasing to the eye. Not to mention the fact that at such a young age, the little girl has a broad mind far beyond that of ordinary people. With every move she makes, waves surge up and down. Absolutely not. The little girl finished chopping the last wooden stake, put the knife on the ground, wiped the sweat from her forehead with a delicate hand, and said lightly, "You haven't come out after watching it for so long." The sound was clear and sweet, like a cheering lark. Has it been discovered? Luzioki was a little surprised. With his ability, as long as he doesn't want to be discovered, even if he walks swaggering in front of others and sneaks around, others may not be able to notice him. The effect of this ability is somewhat similar to Li Laban, but the principle is completely different. Li Laban lowers his sense of existence, and then uses unique invisibility techniques to achieve the effect of disappearing and non-existence. Luzioki, on the other hand, simply restrained her energy and deceived others from the senses. Keep conveying to others, "You can't see me, you can't see me." So even if he swaggers up to others, others' sight, hearing, touch, they will clearly sense his presence, but the meaning conveyed to the brain by each sense is, there is no such person. Going one step further, you can create a fictional character out of thin air in the eyes of others, and let this character be seen, heard, and touched by them. There is a bit of five-sense control in it. Please note that this is an ability developed by Luzioki himself, not a skill. Rather, it was researched bit by bit based on the principles of illusion. He has stayed in the academy for so long, not just wandering around outside all the time, but also going to library school. The inspiration for his ability undoubtedly came from a certain hairspray man. It's just that it's just preliminary development now, and the technology hasn't taken shape yet. After a while, he will probably be able to shout, "Break it into pieces, Suijitsu-kyoka. We have no rivals ahead of us." Not only that, he also studied skills. As mentioned before, after reaching the moonlight realm, if an adventurer wants to break through to sunlight, he must thoroughly master the skills and combine the skills with the power of rules. Although Luzaoki belongs to the immortal cultivating school, this does not prevent him from learning from the advancement model of adventurers to make breakthroughs in his own skills. The skill he used to pilot was 10,000 swords returning to the sect. The current progress has reached the point where the sword energy can be mobilized at will. It is no longer the embarrassing situation in the past where the skill must be activated to fly the sword in full screen. After all, many times, there is no need to be so exaggerated. Why use a butcher's knife to kill a pig? Next, Luzaoki decided to take action on the size and shape of the sword energy. The final skill should be similar to the Senbonzakura of a certain duplicitous Onisan. Back to business. Because of his ability to control the five senses, if Luzaoki wants to do something secretly, it will be difficult for people who are not as good as him to find out. This little girl looks to be only 15 or 16 years old, and her strength is only in the middle stage of starlight, so. Did she really notice that Luzaoki was there, or did she just vaguely feel that something was wrong, so she tried to deceive her? Luzaoki remained silent, intending to play it safe. The next moment, the little girl raised her head and stared directly at Luzaoki's position. Was it really discovered? Luzaoki was a little surprised. After this ability took shape, he tried it many times with others. Except for Zhongli, Xiao Yan's teammate, who could detect something was wrong through his abnormal perception ability, not even Min Dongmei, Xiao Yan's teammate, or the director could detect it. His abilities. The reason why Zhongli was able to detect him was not because of any flaws in his ability, but because this guy's innate ability seemed to be a blessing in terms of observation. She can detect inconsistencies and irregularities through the smallest details, and can further deduce the problem. When you pass by a place, no matter how careful you are, you will leave traces of your past. It may be branches broken by your steps or dust brought up, or it may be subtle deformations left on the terrain. Through these traces, Zhongli can judge many problems and find the points of disharmony. This is how Li Leiban's ability was cracked by her. Luzaoki is naturally no exception. Unless the ability he develops can go one step further and directly and completely control other people's five senses, allowing her to only see what he wants her to see, he will never be able to deceive someone with such a sensitive perception. So, is this girl the same kind of person as Zhongli? Luzaoki looked at the girl intently, but found that although she was facing his direction, her eyes were empty and blank. It seems that he did not see himself. But her expression was full of conviction, knowing that Luzaoki must be at this location. Hey, it would be rude not to come out again. In desperation, Luzaoki cancelled the effect of her ability, revealed her body, and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Hey, how did you find me?" The girl glanced at Luzaoki and suddenly said, "So it's you." Halfway through her words, she suddenly paused and remained silent. Luzaoki felt curious, do you know me?" The girl avoided answering his words and said to herself, "I'm not called Hey, and I'm not called that. You can call me the second most beautiful girl in the world." This little girl is quite narcissistic. The corner of Luzaoki's mouth twitched and she joked, "Okay, pretty girl, do you know me?" "Not a beautiful girl, but the second most beautiful girl in the world." The girl corrected Luzaoki's name seriously, and then said without blinking, I don't know. I believe you. I don't know what you just said. Luzioki rolled her eyes. Since she doesn't want to say it, forget it. Even if she didn't say anything, Luzioki could guess a thing or two. If this girl appears here, she naturally has an extraordinary relationship with Wang Yanran. Knowing him, she is probably related to someone Wang. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 274. Luzioki then changed the subject, the second most beautiful girl in the world, how did you discover me? The girl was obviously very satisfied with this title. She nodded and said seriously, Your Excellency is indeed very capable. But Your Excellency was able to conceal my perception, but you did not deceive my heart. Heart? Luzioki was stunned for a moment, confused by her statement. The girl holding the knife explained calmly, Since I was born, I have been with this long knife, swinging it 108,000 times every day. I have long since developed an exquisite and clear sword heart. Everything around me is reflected in the sword heart. Nothing can escape my thoughts. In this way, we can kill everything. The corners of Luzioki's mouth twitched. He finally figured out that this girl seemed to have a bit of a chuyunibu. This bullshit is outrageous. Did you start practicing swordsmanship as soon as you were born? And swing the knife 18,000 times a day? Your thin arms and legs are not convincing at all. But even if it was bragging, Luzioki understood what she meant. At the same time, I also understood the shortcomings of my abilities. The so-called heart of the sword actually refers to a unique sixth sense intuition. Everyone actually has a sixth sense more or less. For example, you will have some signs in advance of something big that is about to happen to you. I'm not going to brag to you, at the company's annual meeting, before the first prize was announced, Xiaopuja started to feel his heart beat faster, and he won the prize the next year at the same company annual meeting. Xiaopuja didn't feel anything, and he failed to win. Also, when I was in school, when I saw the class teacher walking into the classroom, I subconsciously felt that something was wrong, and as a result, I was called to the office and scolded. There are too many such examples. This girl has undoubtedly developed her sixth sense to a certain extent through a unique method, and gained the ability to sense her surroundings. Or maybe it is more than that. For example, she can also see through other people's weaknesses. Otherwise, how could she dare to brag that she can kill everything? Controlling the five senses is awesome. But for this kind of person who does not rely on the five senses, but relies on the sixth sense, bird food is of no use. Luzioki felt bored for a while. It seems that we still have opponents ahead of us, and there are quite a lot of them. But it doesn't matter, after all, this ability has just been developed, and it may not be possible to deceive even the sixth sense in the future. If you have the ability, you can learn from me about Saint Seiya, and just come up with the seventh and eighth senses. Snored. Luzioki thought this girl was quite interesting. He teased her with interest and said, Oh, I admit that your sword heart is indeed very worrying. But if I directly incarnate in the sky, everything in the heaven and earth is everywhere, and everything can be me or not. How should you respond? The girl's eyes widened. She was a little surprised by Luzioki's question. She froze on the spot and murmured to herself, Everything is me and not me. Everything is me and not me. Hey, I'm just talking casually. Hey, you won't take it seriously, right? Seeing the girl fall into a daze, Luzioki couldn't help but feel bad. Is this little girl going to be obsessed with herself? There is no such thing as martial arts in this world, so that shouldn't be the case, right? Before he could say anything else, the girl came back from her thoughts. Her eyes were shining, and she looked at Luzioki with a grateful face. Thank you, I think I have found the way forward. Hey. What did you find? Stop messing around. Luzioki opened her mouth and was about to say something, but her expression suddenly changed. Because he sensed a familiar aura, like a volcano that had been accumulating for tens of thousands of years, suddenly erupting. The power and momentum were so strong that even Luzioki felt frightened. Because, that aura comes from my sister. Go crazy. My sister is just an ordinary person right now. What did she use to explode with power comparable to the peak of Yuhui? Luzioki didn't care about anything else and stood up and leaped forward, rushing back to the attic in almost a breath. Luzioki thought that only the first one was effective. He shouted eagerly, "Sister, how are you?" Then I saw Lu Wanyi leaning in Wang Yanran's arms with a calm look on her face. The two of them were dressed in rags. Wang Yanran didn't care about being exposed and was slowly dressing her sister. Luzioki felt a little guilty. He touched his nose and wiped away the redness, then stood up and patted the dust on his body, muttering in a low voice, "You obviously turned off the barrier yourself." Because before coming, he forced his sister to show off several kilograms of golden apples. Luzioki did not resist, she still threw him out of the attic, and then watched the attic door slam shut. For a moment, Luzioki didn't know whether to believe Wang Yanran, a moody and unpredictable Sunyao warrior. Luzioki was shocked and angry. He turned over his hand and found that the dagger was already in his hand. The moment the barrier disappeared, Luzioki rushed into the attic. I was both afraid that something would happen to my sister and I didn't stop her outside in time, and I was also afraid that nothing had happened but that I had forced my way in and had an accident. The ability I thought about before was rejected by me, mainly because I felt it didn't match my sister's temperament. I don't feel full after eating this stuff. Luzioki was in a dilemma at this moment. Wang Yanran. Fortunately, this breath quickly stabilized and then slowly fell back. Luzioki felt slightly relieved. If you can't chew anymore, make it into apple juice and drink it. So Luzioki took her sister and forced her to drink a lot of it. Wang Yanran walked out with a cold face. She closed the door behind her back and asked Luzioki, "How many good things have you given your sister?" So, what did Wang Yanran do to her sister? Urgent, urgent, even more urgent than King Gigi, come up with a more awesome talent for your sister and leave a comment. After waiting for a while, the door opened. Then, he hit the rock-solid barrier with an ouch sound. However, after eating it, Lu Wanyi's body did not undergo any obvious changes. If it were just activating the talent, it would definitely not cause such a big movement. With just a cursory glance, the two figures fell into Luzioki's eyes. All the concern in his heart turned into shock, and at the same time, countless mountains and river scenery came into his mind, and Luzioki only felt a warmth at the tip of his nose. But that was secondary. The main thing was that he had confirmed that his sister's breathing was stable and she was fine. She seemed to be just asleep. Wang Yanran frowned, touched her hand, and a huge force came over her. Luzioki. No. Not much. What are you going to do? Obviously, in order to prevent others from breaking in, Wang Yanran deliberately set up a powerful restriction. Get out. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 275. How much is not much, Wang Yanran sneered and then asked. Luzioki was speechless for a moment and quickly changed the subject. How is the situation now? Wang Yanran said, didn't you see everything? Luzioki recalled the dazzling white skin and nodded involuntarily, well, it's very big. Big. Wang Yanran was stunned for a moment, and then she realized what she was doing. A look of embarrassment flashed across her face, and she raised her hand to teach Luzioki a lesson. Luzioki quickly shrank her neck, looking scared. Perhaps because she was thinking that this was her own home and she had ruined the venue, she was still the one who felt uncomfortable, so Wang Yanran's raised hand froze in the air and did not fall down for a long time. She could only say humph, and said fiercely. He glared at Lu Xiaoqi. The last sentence was, "Your sister will wake up within half an hour." Then she left without looking back. Lu Xiaoqi's spirit was shaken. He understood what she meant and was overjoyed. Wang Yanran said this. There is no doubt that her sister's body has completely recovered, and her talent has even been successfully awakened. Lu Xiaoqi suddenly had mixed feelings. Over the years, his biggest wish has always been to completely cure his sister. Until today, it finally came true. His adoptive parents disappeared, and he and his sister depended on each other. He watched with his own eyes as this young and immature girl shouldered the burden of supporting the family. The blood on the face is getting less and less day by day, and the body is getting weaker day by day. But he was still a child and couldn't do anything about it. He could only watch his family's situation deteriorate and his sister work hard to earn money by working odd jobs outside. Whenever he heard the sobbing from his sister in the next room in the dead of night, he would clench his fists, grit his teeth, and toss and turn, unable to sleep. Later, my sister gradually learned to be strong and no longer secretly hid in bed crying, but her coughing became more severe day by day. Lu Xiaoqi can't do anything. That's why he works so hard, studies hard, and exercises hard. Even if his talent was finally tested to be gray, he was not discouraged at all. Because he knows that if he wants to change his sister and his own destiny, he must become an adventurer. Fortunately, he succeeded in the end. Looking at Wang Yanran's retreating back, her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't say thank you. I can only keep it in my heart silently. Lu Wanyi slept comfortably, feeling more relaxed than ever. She seemed to have broken free from some restraints, and her whole body felt like she was in a state of ecstasy. The phrase "after being in a cage for a long time, I can return to nature" is the most appropriate way to describe her feelings at this moment. She gradually regained consciousness, and when she opened her eyes, she saw an unfamiliar ceiling. This caused her brain, which had not been fully activated, to shut down. Lu Wanyi slowly sat up, the quilt on her body slowly slipped off, and she suddenly realized that she was not wearing any set of clothes that she was familiar with. She was startled, opened her mouth and shouted, "Xiaoqi! Xiaoqi!" Hey! Almost the next moment, his brother's deep and melodious voice came from outside the door. Creak! Lu Xiaoqi pushed open the wooden door and walked in with a gentle smile on her face. "Wanyi, you're awake." Seeing her younger brother, Lu Wanyi finally felt relieved. She frowned and asked, "Where am I?" Lu Xiaoqi held Lu Wanyi's hand, and the mana penetrated her sister's body and circulated in a circle. No problem was found, and then she said softly, "Sister, have you forgotten? We are in Wang Yanran's home now." Wang Yanran. Oh. Lu Wanyi suddenly realized as she recalled several scenes that flashed through her mind before she fell into coma. Then he asked hesitantly, "Brother, Yanran said she wanted to help me awaken my talent. Has my talent awakened now? Don't you know whether your own talent has awakened or not?" Now that I suddenly stepped into the extraordinary world, one can imagine the panic and confusion in my heart. Great sage dash, myth. Omniscient and omnipotent law. But he could also understand his sister's fear and confusion. Although Lu Wanyi looks gentle and weak, she is not stupid. On the contrary, she is quite smart in some aspects because she can support a family in her teens. What does it mean to increase the speed of perception to the limit? To understand this, we first need to understand what exactly is the definition of perception. Thinking leap, increase the speed of perception to the limit, increases with the improvement of strength. Currently it can be increased 20 times. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Wanyi's talent bar: gray, inferior, white, ordinary, blue, advanced, purple, rare, gold, legendary, red, mythical. Wanyi, you must remember, even if it is the person closest to you, do not reveal your talents and skills to them. After systematic study, he can clearly understand how abnormal Lu Wanyi's talent is. This is the second talent he has seen with multiple entries besides his own. Is this a red myth? Thank you Yanzu and Yifei for your enthusiastic comments. Xiaopija has read most of the suggestions you put forward, and inspirations are constantly bursting out in his mind. Finally, he chose this talent. As for why it is, don't worry, I will give it to you later. The article will be written, including the sixth sense, intuition, and above this, the seventh sense, mana consciousness, time sense, and the eighth sense, alaya consciousness, space sense, are also included. The reason why we can know what everything in the world is, what is the passage of time, what is up, down, left, and right, all depends on the function of consciousness. Let's look at the first entry, thinking leap. Ridiculously strong. She was just an ordinary person for the past 20 years, and most of the things she came into contact with were ordinary things. Lu Zioki took a breath of air. Brother, come and help me see what my talent is all about. Lu Zioki emphasized with a serious face, then his expression changed and he said with a smile, of course, your brother is excluded. After Lu Zioki's words and deeds, Lu Wanyi quickly mastered the use of her own panel. Lu Zioki felt funny for a while. Although he only saw two talents with his own eyes, she generously showed her panel to Lu Zioki for inspection. But this doesn't mean that he only knows two talents. The so-called perception refers to the direct effect on the senses of objective things to produce the overall cognition of things in the mind. This perception is not limited to hearing, vision, touch, taste, and smell. Lu Zioki. Thinking of this, Lu Zioki took her sister into her arms and taught her step by step how to sense her own status, check her talents, skills, etc. Multiple chance, release multiple skills at the same time. In short, we can understand it as the ability to perceive and recognize all things. Fortunately, she still has an arm she can rely on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 276. People with a strong sense of awareness will have a much stronger perception of everything around them than others. Of course, this strength may be reflected in a certain aspect. For example, some people are good at paying attention to changes in things around them, some people are more sensitive to time, and some people have a stronger sense of space. These can be regarded as one aspect of consciousness being more prominent than others. Lu Wanyi's first entry is undoubtedly about enhancing consciousness. It's just that the aspects of her enhancement are somewhat different from the above. She did not strengthen her understanding of things, time, and space. The function of her entry is that when she activates her talent Great Sage, her perception speed will be greatly improved. As we all know, the speed at which people can capture external information is actually very limited. For example, the limit of frames visible to the human eye is actually 55 frames, meaning that 55 changes in the picture can be detected per second. Beyond this number of frames, the human eye cannot detect the hidden information. After being strengthened, adventurers can surpass this limit and reach 80, 100, or even higher. But the conventional value is only about 50 frames. Because of Lu Zioki's unique cultivation system, his normal visual frame rate is close to 400, while his limit frame rate is around 600. This means a very embarrassing thing, that is, all TV programs are actually the same as slideshows in his eyes. That's why he doesn't like watching TV. And what about sister? Her current visual frame rate may only be about 50, but when she activates the Great Sage, she can reach an exaggerated frame rate of 1000 in an instant. That is to say, 1,000 dynamic changes can be observed in 1 second. You can imagine how terrifying this terrifying dynamic vision brought to her perception. Not only vision, but all aspects of perception are improved. This means that her sensitivity to external information is 20 times higher than that of ordinary people. She can easily see things that others cannot notice. Taking it a step further, she can even see things that others can't. For example, ultrasonic waves, infrasound waves, infrared rays, ultraviolet rays, etc. are things that are beyond the frequency of human perception. Of course, this is not all good. This means that the information her brain receives every second is dozens of times more than that of an ordinary person. If she cannot handle it in time, her mind will go blank and she will be at a loss. But this is not insurmountable. The human brain actually has this function itself. People actually receive much more information every second than they know, but a lot of information is judged by the subconscious mind as invalid information, so it is discarded directly. It is even said that people do this subjectively. For example, when you are concentrating on something, you will ignore some information next to it. This phenomenon creates many interesting scenarios. For example, when a person is on the phone, he will catch whatever the person next to him hands him. Another example is that when you were concentrating on playing with your mobile phone and even laughed like a pig, you didn't even notice that the class teacher was standing behind you. Luzaoki believes that as long as her sister overcomes these problems after a period of training, she will become the most terrifying existence when she activates her natural abilities. Because nothing can escape her induction. In her perceptual world, the speed of everything in the world will seem to be slowed down 20 times, similar to the bullet time of the Matrix. People use the word one step ahead to seize the opportunity. When you get to my sister's place, I will tell you to take 1 step and I will take 20 steps. The main thing is one that is 19 times ahead of you. I just want to ask if your ability is awesome. The most important thing is that this is only one of the 3 abilities brought to her by her talent. There are 2 more that haven't been mentioned yet. Let's look at the second one. Multiple chance. The effect lives up to its name. It means releasing multiple skills at once, focusing on an instant burst. Other people's skills are thrown one after another. After pressing one, they press another, and they even have to stop and take a break in the middle to relax the skills from moving forward and back. Lu Wanyi is different. Multiple chance. My skill bar went completely black in just 1 second. Dried bamboo shoots explode. Proper coordination between skills can even produce a chain reaction, causing qualitative changes and achieving the effect of 1 add 1 3. Give me a chestnut. After Lu Wanyi locked the target, she raised her hand, weakness and wither, which lowered the opponent's attributes and reduced the enemy's magic resistance. Then a life-killing curse followed by a dark magic ball, and finally a magical annihilation. First break the defense and control, then put a mark on the enemy, and finally detonate. It only took Lu Wanyi 1 second to execute the set of combos. The enemy didn't even have a chance to react before he fell to the ground and twitched. Of course, this is just one of the combinations. There are countless other combinations. Although there are only 9 skill columns, only 9 skills can be learned. But if these 9 skills are matched and combined with each other, there are too many tricks to play. Not to mention that each skill type is different. You can learn auxiliary, output, defense, treatment, control. Not to mention the beauty. The degree of abnormality in the first 2 entries is such that Luzaoki would like to call it the strongest talent he has ever seen besides himself, bar none. By the 3rd entry, he was confused just by looking at the name. What is omniscient and omnipotent law? Putting aside the pile of question marks behind it, let's first talk about what omniscience and omnipotence mean. Omniscient and omnipotent means omniscient and omnipotent. Everyone may know this term, but few people use it. Except for the magic stick. because this word is what they use to describe their gods. It means that no one can be omniscient and omnipotent except God. Here is another very interesting little story, that is the famous God paradox. The Holy See preaches that God is omnipotent and possesses omniscience and omnipotent power, and calls on everyone to believe in God. A wise man ridiculed this excessive worship and asked a tit-for-tat question: since God is omniscient and omnipotent, can he create a rock that he cannot lift? This sentence is very interesting. If God is truly omniscient and omnipotent, then he must be able to create such a stone. But if there is such a stone that even God cannot move, how can he claim to be omniscient and omnipotent? If God cannot create, it means that he is not omniscient and omnipotent. This sentence made the people in the Holy See speechless, and they could no longer force others to believe in religion. This allusion has profound meaning, and it also illustrates one thing: there is no such thing as omniscience and omnipotence in the world. But now, Luzioki actually saw this word on her sister's talent column. Global copy: my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author: Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 277. Does this mean that Lu Wanyi can have omniscience and omnipotence by turning on her talent Great Sage? This is obviously impossible. If this is really the case, just this entry can be more powerful than Luzioki, who has completed the talent. How could such an awesome ability be achieved by a mythical talent? Therefore, her third entry, omniscience and omnipotence, is not the same as omniscience and omnipotence. In Luzioki's view, this omniscient and omnipotent method should be similar to an ability to simulate an omniscient and omnipotent state. It is a kind of omniscience and omnipotence within limited conditions. It definitely has an upper limit, but when it enters the state, it is basically in a low-level invincible situation. In other words, by activating her natural abilities, Lu Wanyi should be able to have absolute dominance within a certain range of strength and be invincible to others. Similar to Luzioki's feeling, the sun cannot shine and the moonlight is invincible. And how big this range is may depend on the upper limit of her own strength. In order to verify this conjecture, Luzioki urged her sister to try her natural ability in front of him. Lu Wanyi was also a little excited. Awakening her talent is of great significance to her. It not only means that her body is finally back to normal, but it also means that she is no longer just a little pendant that drags her brother down. As long as she works hard, she can slowly catch up with Luzioki. She didn't ask for much help to her brother, she just asked that she wouldn't have to cause trouble to her brother in the future, and she would be satisfied if he had to be distracted to take care of her when his brother was dealing with danger. She was also pleased to hear her brother marvel at her talent. In fact, she didn't know exactly what this talent meant, but just listening to her brother's tone, she could feel that this ability was not simple. I will definitely be able to help Luzioki in the future. So when Luzioki asked her to show it, she took a deep breath without hesitation and activated her talent Great Sage according to the method Luzioki described. Talent activated. Lu Wanyi was shocked, her eyes were shrouded in a faint golden light, and her beautiful long black hair instantly turned into a metallic silvery white. The whole person's expression became cold, and the momentum couldn't stop rising, as if the Supreme Being was personally present, and the saint was alive. Luzioki's expression suddenly changed. Because he felt like Lu Wanyi in front of him suddenly changed to a different person. This change does not refer to changes in appearance. As a golden elixir level immortal cultivator, his way of judging who a person is no longer limited to appearance. Human inner being is the only criterion. A person's appearance may change, but his essence, including the more essential power derived from the soul level, is difficult to change. And just now, the moment Lu Wanyi unlocked her natural ability, not only her appearance but also her temperament changed. More importantly, her energy and spirit have undergone earth-shaking changes. It was as if an unknown existence had awakened in her body. It turns out that this great sage's innate ability is like this. At this moment, the golden light in Lu Wanyi's eyes dimmed, and her long silver-white hair was replaced by a head of black hair. As she spoke, she suddenly smiled, and her originally cold face was like 100 flowers blooming. The real combat power they can exert will fluctuate within a range. The first and second items are actually just additions. The most important item is actually the omniscient and omnipotent method full of question marks. The changes after Lu Wanyi started it were undoubtedly brought about by the third entry. When Lu Wanyi takes the lead, it is like a living creature, but the information from the outside will also be processed by the great sage and then passed on to Lu Wanyi. While reducing her pressure, it also allows her to see a completely different person from before. World. The difference between the two is the change that Lu Zioqi just felt. Under the mode dominated by the great sage, Lu Wanyi is as cold as ice, like a machine with only reason and no emotions. In this mode, all Lu Wanyi's actions are through the optimal solution derived from countless precise calculations. After turning on the talent, there will be two modes for Lu Wanyi to choose from. This will is exactly the great sage that Lu Zioqi just felt. It's also Lu Wanyi. As she spoke, she began to chatter about her talents. As she spoke, Lu Zioqi once again felt her sister's familiar soul fluctuations in her body. It turned out that after activating her talent, Lu Wanyi could feel a supreme will awakening in her body. The elder sister's eyes were bright. She jumped slightly, hugged Lu Zioqi's arm, and said softly, "Brother, this talent is so amazing." Lu Zioqi's familiar aura returned. This is similar to the feeling of Dugu-9 swords or Dai Zongfu in martial arts novels, and it is also a Dugu-9 swords or Dai Zongfu with independent intelligence. With the assistance of the great sage's will, Lu Zioqi no longer has to worry about the first entry, how much trouble 20 times the perception speed will bring to her sister. The two modes can be switched freely and changed at will. Oh, Lu Zioqi pulled out her dagger, looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar Lu Wanyi coldly, and said sternly, "Who are you?" Why does Lu Wanyi, who has turned on her talent, seem like a different person? After hearing her sister's explanation, Lu Zioqi slowly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, it can collect the surrounding information for analysis and interpretation, and then make the optimal response based on this information. The more elite the adventurer, the smaller the range of this fluctuation, but it only shows that the resident combat power tends to be stable, and does not guarantee that it will be a fixed combat power value. This made him feel slightly relieved. He took back his dagger, frowned and said, "What on earth is going on?" Lu Wanyi looked at Lu Zioqi indifferently, not panicking at all when facing the dagger that was shining coldly at her vital points. "I am a great sage. One is led by the great sage, with Lu Wanyi watching, the other is the other way around, with Lu Wanyi taking the lead and the great sage assisting. Therefore, even a sun-level adventurer will run the risk of being defeated by an adventurer of a lower level than him. This is also the reason why the protagonist can always surpass the level challenge. The great sage did not replace Lu Wanyi, but integrated with Lu Wanyi to a certain extent. This great sage can bring out his sister's strength to the extreme and always maintain her peak combat power. And this so-called great sage is not just an assistant. You know, everyone's strength is not static. The same goes for Lu Zioqi. Because these actions do not require Lu Wanyi to worry about, they are all done automatically by the great sage. The range of this fluctuation is related to factors such as their combat experience, mentality, equipment, opponents, and venues. Global copy. My talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 278. What a great sage! What an omniscient and omnipotent method! Only then did Lu Zioqi understand where the strongest talent was. Seeing her proud sister, Lu Zioqi couldn't help but think of a sentence in her mind. You are already a mature talent, it's time to learn to fight monsters and level up on your own. Good guy. I have to say that Lu Zioqi is also a little envious of her sister. Compared with this sister who doesn't need to move and whose talent is fully automatic, Lu Xiaoqi's great talent is just. Ahem, you should be much stronger. But in terms of being unreasonable, 10 great sages are not as good as one incomplete wind spirit moon shadow. But with this talent, Lu Xiaoqi at least no longer has to worry about her sister's safety. A sister with a great sage only needs to accumulate strength without thinking. There is no such thing as an artificially high strength or a paper tiger. Thinking of this, Lu Xiaoqi pondered for a moment and decided that it was time to tell her sister what she had concealed for a long time. But now is not the time, let's talk about it later. After awakening her talent, her sister seemed extremely excited. She pulled Lu Xiaoqi and chatted a lot, and then called Wang Yanran back. The two girls played and laughed for a while. Seeing that it was time for dinner, Lu Xiaoqi had no choice but to shamelessly follow her sister and have a meal at Wang Yanran's place. I have to say that rich people are good. There were only 3 people, but a large table of dishes was ordered. These dishes are carefully crafted and are clearly made by masters. Each one has a louder name than the last. The waiter next to him introduces the names of the dishes and how to eat them while serving them. What about anchovy fin, farewell my concubine, red plum fragrance? It doesn't sound like something ordinary people can afford. The table is a large round table with a turntable on it. Whatever you want to eat, you can just turn the dishes to your side and pick them up. If you have any inconvenience, you can ask the waiter waiting for help. After being transformed by Golden Apple, Lu Wanyi now eats a lot and eats with gusto. Not only did she keep eating by herself, but she also gave Lu Xiaoqi some food while eating. When he eats something delicious, his eyes light up, and he shares it with Lu Xiaoqi. Come on, brother, try this. This is delicious. Lu Xiaoqi originally had a large appetite, but after eating grains, he no longer relied on these whole grains for energy, so it was enough to cope with the food that Lu Wanyi put into the bowl. Wang Yanran is even more gentle. She basically only takes a bite of each dish. No matter how delicious it is, she can only eat 2 chopsticks at most. Lu Xiaoqi estimated that she had long been accustomed to eating these delicacies, but she felt that they were too ordinary. In fact, Wang Yanran is not like this usually, but looking at the appearance of the 2 siblings, she doesn't know why the food in her mouth doesn't taste good. If a sensible netizen were here, he would definitely shout, "Wow, it's too much to trick a dog into killing him." After having enough wine and food, Lu Wanyi touched her belly and sighed with contentment. Wang Yanran smiled lightly and said, "How about it? My chef's skills are pretty good, right?" As he said that, he gave Lu Xiaoqi a provocative look. When Wang Yanran was treating her sister, she often spent time at Lu Xiaoqi's house. My sister is undergoing treatment, so naturally Lu Xiaoqi is the only one cooking. Although his craftsmanship cannot be said to be bad, there is definitely a certain gap compared with the chef. It's self-evident what Wang Yanran's expression means. Lu Wanyi didn't notice the smell of gunpowder between the two of them, and nodded sharply when she heard this. It's delicious. The chef of Yanran's family did a great job. Soon she saw the items left behind in the king's treasure and the letter. Then Wang Yanran smiled and said, "I've never heard of this. I must see it if I have the chance." Don't be so tough on yourself. Lu Wanyi's mind was actually quite delicate, and she soon noticed that something was wrong with her brother's expression. He took out the ring that had been dusted for a long time, handed it to his sister, and said softly, "Sister, take it with you." Mr. Lu put his little hands on his hips and was so arrogant. Lu Xiaoqi hummed twice, raised her head and said, "Have you ever heard of the peerless double pepper and the gathering of heroes?" Lu Xiaoqi sighed, and finally decided to tell her sister the matter directly. But Lu Xiaoqi looked at Lu Wanyi and didn't know how to say this. "Why do you look unhappy? There is one thing that has been brewing in my heart for a long time. My sister's body has completely recovered. It's time to tell her about her adoptive parents. Luzioki nodded lightly, definitely next time. Luzioki continued, you haven't heard of walking in the snow to seek plum blossoms and blue dragon walking in the snow, right? But it's still a little inferior to my specialty dishes. But the name just sounds domineering. Could it be that he really has some special skills that he hasn't used yet? Tears blurred her vision, and her whole body could not stop trembling. Scenes from the past reappeared in front of her eyes. Lu Wanyi's pretty face turned red, she gently pulled Luzioki's clothes, and whispered, it's getting late, shall we go? When I lived in Chengdu, I ate your 3-plate axe over and over again several times. How could I not know? Wang Yanran couldn't pretend that she didn't hear this, she raised her eyebrows slightly and said, oh? Why don't I know what you are good at? Wang Yanran frowned and muttered a few words. Others don't know what's going on. How can Lu Wanyi, who has lived with Luzioki for more than 10 years, still not know what a peerless double pepper is and what a gathering of heroes is? Lu Wanyi stared blankly at the familiar handwriting on the letter, and her eyes suddenly turned red. She pursed her lips and took the ring with trembling hands. To be honest, I haven't heard of it. How can you prepare these dishes to entertain guests? Luzioki felt distressed when she saw it, and quickly went up to hug her sister, as if he wanted to tell her in this way that he was still by her side, comfort her, and let her not be sad. After reading just 2 lines, her tears fell onto the letter with a clack sound. The stinky brother is really brave, he dares to say anything. His excited expression subsided slightly, he took Luzioki's hand and asked doubtfully, Zioki, what's wrong with you? When she got home, the excitement on her sister's face still didn't dissipate, but Luzioki was a little silent. My sister's body trembled, and she obviously recognized this relic left by her parents. There are also those who walk in the snow to look for plum blossoms, and the blue dragon lying in the snow. Peerless double peppers are fried green peppers and red peppers, gathering of heroes is diced radish, walking in the snow to seek plum blossoms is tomato salad, Qinglong Wok is cucumbers. Luzioki curled her lips in disdain and muttered, it tastes good. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 279. Maybe Luzioki's comfort had an effect, or maybe Lu Wanyi was stronger than Luzioki imagined. After reading the letter, her sister's mood was much more stable than Luzioki imagined. She stroked the mage suit left to her by her parents, but the expression on her face became extremely determined. I want to become stronger, Zioki. Lu Wanyi said to Luzioki. Luzioki has no objections. Before that, Luzioki had to do one more thing. That is to provide an insurance for my sister's safety. Thus, the Pure Land of Paradise welcomed its first outsider Lu Wanyi. The process is very simple. Luzioki held her sister's hand, and through his guidance, Lu Wanyi successfully entered Luzioki's city. When Luzioki's thoughts took shape and appeared next to Lu Wanyi, she was already looking around curiously. It was the first time for Lu Wanyi to experience this wonderful experience of suddenly moving from a familiar place to an unfamiliar place, and her heart was filled with a sense of novelty. However, Luzioki had already greeted her before starting, so she did not panic and waited for Luzioki to come and pick her up. Zioki. Lu Wanyi saw with her own eyes the scene where countless light spots around her condensed into Luzioki's body. She couldn't help but feel shocked. She came up to hold Luzioki's hand and pinched his cheek. Wow, it's just like the real thing. Lu Wanyi's hands were touching Luzioki's body, as if she was looking for something. Luzioki rolled her eyes and grabbed her sister's not-so-honest hands. Don't touch it. This body was formed by my consciousness, and it is the same as my outer body. Oh, Lu Wanyi nodded. Lu Zioqi took her sister and briefly introduced her to the city that belonged to him. The two of them walked and chatted all the way to the city lord's mansion. Entering the hall, Lu Zioqi looked at her sister with burning eyes. Wanyi, are you willing to join the Pure Land of Paradise and become a member of the city? He did not emphasize the benefits of becoming a unit of the city, but simply explained that the city belonged to him, and joining the city would undoubtedly mean becoming Lu Zioqi's subordinate. But Lu Zioqi knew that her sister would not reject him. I do. Sure enough, Lu Wanyi nodded and agreed without hesitation. Although Lu Zioqi already knew the answer, he still smiled happily when he heard his sister's unhesitating I do. The next moment, the contract is established. Lu Wanyi's message was captured by the city lord's palace and engraved in the city. The whole city shook slightly, as if welcoming new members to join. Lu Zioqi smiled slightly. This is the city's gift to you. For an adventurer like my sister who, although her attributes are not very good, has mythical talents and is destined to reach the top, the bonds it gives are worthy of the top. Talent, Great Sage. Equipment column, Astro's suit, 5-piece set, Destroyer staff, legendary equipment. Feeling the huge improvement in her body, she opened her mouth in an O shape and looked at Lu Zioqi stammering, Zioqi, what's going on? Skill bar. The Holy Judgment has two effects. The first is that the Holy Judgment is successful and directly kills all enemy units with less than a quarter of their HP. The second is that the Holy Judgment fails, and your unit will directly recover 50% of its losses. In other words, if Lu Wanyi uses an S-level ultimate move, she can use it again in the next second. These bonuses are just a drop in the bucket for Lu Zioqi who has full attributes, but for the novice Lu Wanyi, the improvement is much greater. Lu Zioqi didn't need to say much, and just gave her a bag of salt. Therefore, Lu Wanyi must use the big skill for the third time. Not to mention other things, you can tell at a glance that these two bonds of my sister are standard 5 cards. Basic attack, 596 add 500, basic defense, 747 add 300, vitality, 6950 add 2000/6950 add 2000, magic power, 1592/1592, speed 70 add 30, the plus sign is followed by the city's attribute bonus. Lu Wanyi also trembled slightly, and all attributes were greatly improved. Character, Lu Wanyi, 1-star unit. Bonds, Spellcaster, 2/4/8, Holy Inquisition, 1. Spellcaster, 2/4/8 every time 3/2/1 skills are released, one additional spell can be cast, no consumption, instant casting. Including the monsters in the city, they are among the best in ancient mythology, so their bonds are not inferior at all, and all of them have a 5-cost appearance. The big dick is me, I am the big dick. Lu Zioqi finally understood that this bond was just a matter of taste. So his bond is the best, it can be called a combination of 3 5 cards. But even so, it doesn't need to be said how powerful this bond is, right? Holy Judgment, 1. When the HP of the enemy unit on the field is lower than 25%, it will be judged by the Holy Judgment. If the Holy Judgment is successful, the enemy unit will be killed directly. If the Holy Judgment fails, all our units will recover 50% loss. The bonding effect is more powerful than the other, and the growth of all members is always possible. This loss includes the blood, mana, physical strength of your own units and even the durability of buildings and equipment. Just maximize the battery life. The premise is that he must join Lu Zioqi's city. What it looks at is not how powerful this person is, but how high this person's potential is. Although my sister's panel looks very good, and it doesn't match the strength of the 5 cards. It is even said that 1 cards can be matched with her 50-50, but she can't stand the fetters of others and just resists. It's just that the current caster bond in the city is only Lu Wanyi. Even including Luzioki's City Lord effect, there are only 2 people, and they need to release 3 skills to cast an additional spell. In Luzioki's eyes, her sister's attributes are as follows. So to see how good a person is, just take a look at the matching bonds that the city has given him. Not to mention Holy Judgment, its effect is activated directly when the enemy unit's health is lower than a quarter. In other words, as long as the health of the enemy unit is lower than a quarter, no matter the enemy on the field is, no matter how many units there are, or how strong they will be directly drawn into the Holy Inquisition. Luzioki's eyes widened. For spellcasters, 8 units are needed to achieve great success. Each time you release a skill, you can cast an additional spell. Please note that this casting is free of consumption and casts instantly. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 280. Since my sister has just awakened her talent to become an adventurer, her attributes in all aspects are not very high. She has this basic panel because Luzioki helped her recuperate her body before. The biggest contribution should be the golden apple, which roughly has a star glow. Initial level. The Astro suit is one of the 2 suits left by their adoptive parents. One of the leather armors has been worn by Luzioki. Now this suit is cloth armor suitable for mages, which happens to be the same as Lu Wanyi's spellcasting type. Talent to match. My sister hasn't learned her skills yet. It depends on her. What route does she want to take? Only after the route is determined can Luzioki arrange the skills for her. There is no shortage of spellcasting skills in his hands. He has countless skills in his hand without any calculation. Even if there is no suitable one, as long as his sister is willing, he can find a way to get it for her. However, the 9 skill bars were immediately unblocked by Luzioki. It is worth mentioning that out of 9 skill columns, my sister only blocked 1, and Luzioki only used 1 unlocking scroll to do it. This means that my sister's mythical talent is far more than Luzioki imagined. As mentioned before, the number of skill columns unlocked by different talents is different. The number of skill columns corresponding to myth should be 7, and my sister has unlocked 8. Xiaomeng, come out. Luzioki patted the cup-shaped sculpture in the center of the city main hall and called out to the snack guy. The divine fragments that he had piled up in the hall like a mountain have all disappeared. It is not known whether they were eaten up by some foodie or hidden. In Luzioki's opinion, it should be the second type. The Holy Grail shook, a faint light emitted from the mouth of the cup, and a cute foodie like Thumbelina stretched out and floated out. Master, why did you call me duck? In the past 2 days, this little guy's life has been very comfortable, either eating or sleeping and eating at the same time. Fortunately, her structure is very different from the human body structure, otherwise she would have turned into a fat girl long ago. Lu Wanyi's eyes lit up when she saw Xiaomeng. Undoubtedly, the cuteness of this little guy poked Lu Wanyi's heart, making her a little bit ready to move. Luzioki was not confused by this little guy's appearance. He stretched out his palm and spread it out in front of the cute foodie. Where is the power of Godhead you transformed before? Bring it. The elf opened his big innocent and ignorant eyes, as if he didn't understand what Luzioki said. Abba, Abba, Abba. It's not that she doesn't really understand, she's just a little reluctant. The things I had worked so hard to transform and accumulate were all taken away by the owner. Somewhat unhappy. Luzioki looked at her little appearance and didn't know what was going on in her mind. He rolled his eyes at her angrily, waved his hand, and another small mountain of divine fragments fell into the hall. The elf's eyes lit up and he was about to pounce, but was stopped by Luzioki's slap. One hand pays and one hand delivers the goods. Oh, the elf pouted and reluctantly spat out a piece of sparkling spar. The spar was about the size of a grain of rice. When it fell into Luzioki's hand, he could hardly feel its weight. Why so little? Luzioki frowned slightly. That much. The elf's eyes widened and he shouted angrily, "It's already a lot, okay." Luzioki ignored her shouting, and flicked the hot divine power that he had just obtained into the core hub with his fingers, and said casually, "In the future, you can just put the transformed divine power here." Before he could say anything, he was startled. The power of the Godhead sank into the core hub, and a message was directly transmitted to his mind. The power of the Godhead increases by 3,000 units. Luzioki. A crystal the size of a grain of rice actually contains 3,000 units of divine power? You're not kidding me, are you? You know, it only costs 100 units of divine power to upgrade a basic building from 1 star to 2 stars. This grain of rice is enough for Luzioki to upgrade 30 basic buildings. What kind of trouble are you making? Then Luzioki looked at the elf, her eyes full of apology. It seemed that she had indeed misunderstood it. In the past 2 days, this little snack has really been working hard. In order to apologize and thank the elf for its efforts during this period, Luzioki waved her hand and got 2 more piles of divine fragments for it. 3 hills were piled up in the hall, and the impact on the cute foodie was undoubtedly huge. She opened her mouth, her eyes were shining, and she plunged directly into the divine fragment with a whoosh sound, burying herself in it. In. Luzioki laughed dumbly, shook her head slightly, and pulled her sister, who was still obsessed with the elf, out of the hall. Naturally, his coming to harvest the power of the Godhead was not a sudden whim, but rather a well-prepared move. Luzioki planned to use these divine powers to encourage her sister. The sister with the great sage talent is the best to improve her strength. Because no matter how you improve, there will never be a situation where your level is empty and your strength cannot be used. After all, my sister has a beater on her person. Luzioki pulled her sister to stand next to the energy pool, found her sister's personal panel in the city panel, and clicked to increase the star. The power of 1,500 Godhead disappeared in an instant, and my sister's momentum also skyrocketed, and the panel attributes jumped crazily. In just the blink of an eye, my sister's realm has reached the moonlight level from the starlight realm, and the 1 star on the personal panel has also become 2 stars. Luzioki was thoughtful. 1 star probably represents the starlight realm, while 2 stars correspond to the moonlight realm. Does Samsung mean it is sunshine level? What about 4 stars? Above the sun. Luzioki took a breath of cold air and didn't dare to think about it anymore. However, this star raising consumes a lot of divine power. Luzioki originally thought that 3,000 divine power was a lot, but now it seems that it is not enough at all. This elf still doesn't work hard enough. Luzioki was wondering whether he should find a companion for her and let her curl up. Black charcoal head is a good choice. Lu Wanyi, whose strength has reached the level of Yu Hui, coupled with the equipment and skills left to her by her adoptive parents, seems to Luzioki to have finally begun to have the ability to protect herself. It's a pity that the adventurer's assessment cannot be taken until next year. Lu Wanyi cannot enter the dungeon until she passes the assessment. You cannot perform dungeon baptism without entering the dungeon. Although with Lu Wanyi's current strength, it doesn't matter whether he can be washed or not, but mosquito legs are also meat. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing Luzioki almost forgot. That is the holy cloth. Every unit in the city has a set of this thing.